Nice.
Super. Thank you so much. Hello, Beady friends. My name is Meredith Roddy. Most of you, many of you know me already, but I see a lot of new names popping up as well. So welcome to my class for Beadalon for the Michaels Community Classroom on behalf of Beadalon. As Felicia mentioned in the intro, this class is being recorded. So if there's anything that I go over too quickly, you can always go back once they've posted it on the Michaels YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours and rewatch all to your heart's content. Skip over the chatty parts, slow motion over the demo parts, and learn everything that you need to learn today about making earrings. So today's class is going to be, a broad one. We're going to talk about a lot of different techniques, and I'm going to give a lot of tips because when you're thinking about making earrings, there is such a huge breadth of styles, designs, techniques that you can use when you're making earrings. We're going to start with the absolute very basic. If you've never made a piece of jewelry at all before, oftentimes where you start is with a pair of earrings, right? They're super easy, super fast. Everyone can see them and compliment them when you have them on. Great for gifting, great for selling if you are a maker who sells. So we're going to start very, very simple. Headpin wrapped loop earring, bang. But we have a whole hour. That's not going to take us very long at all. So I'm going to go through a couple of the other techniques that were included in the handout, including making an earring with a pinch bail and making a dangle earring. And there was one other one. What was that? Hold on, I just have to pull it up really quickly. Where is my handout? I had it up and now I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. And then showing how to do a briolette loop as well. So if all of these words are very familiar to you, awesome. We will also have some great extra tips, tricks, and couple things up my sleeve as we go along. Quick question came in on the chat that I want to address. If you are not familiar with the Michaels Community Classroom, if you go over on the Michaels YouTube channel, there is a whole section, a whole playlist of all of the past classes. You can sort it by jewelry classes, you can sort it by painting classes, all of the different classes that Michaels so generously offers through the Community Classroom. You can go back and watch over and over again. I think that's all I have for announcements in the beginning. Again, I'm Meredith from Beadalon, for those of you who may have joined a moment or two after the intro. And Felicia, I'm ready to go ahead and take that overhead camera and start getting into it. Okay, so let's see, I want to pull my chair in without disturbing Finn too much. He took his seat underneath the table as usual. And you can see got a lot of stuff in the periphery, a lot of materials, some beads. I've got a lot of tools. Again, we're going to start simple and we're going to work through it. We'll see how far we get. We'll see how complicated. Maybe at the end of this, we'll be doing all kinds of crazy stitched earrings, and no, we're not going to do that. But just to talk you through the earrings from the photo, this is what we're building up to with all of the skills. All of the skills that we're going to be talking about today, all the tips and techniques are all going to build to an earring that we're actually making the ear wire ourselves. We're going to attach a whole bunch of dangles to a chain for a really nice, sometimes some people call this a cha-cha style or a dangle-do or a dangly earring. So these are the earrings from the photo. And as you might kind of extrapolate, you can use really any beads that you have in your stash. A couple of leftover beads from another project make great earrings. Again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We're going to start simple. So let's talk a little bit about some of the materials that you might need when you're starting making earrings. It can be very intimidating, right? If you've never done this before, you walk into Michaels and there's a huge wall of findings, and the first thing that you're going to need are ear wires. Now, there are ear wires in all different shapes and sizes. And as someone just very astutely mentioned in our chat during the live class, there are also clip-on earrings, right? Any of the earring findings that you find in Michael's will be attachable. You will be able to attach something to them to make a pair of earrings. So whether or not you use a ear wire like this, if you use a different type of ear wire, if you use a clip-on ear wire, or like I mentioned, we are going to learn how to make our own ear wires very, very simply. So all of these different things, what you're going to need to get started is an ear wire, right? We're making earrings. We don't need a clasp. We need an ear wire. Something else that's very, very helpful to have when you are making earrings are jump rings. So here in the Beadalon Findings Variety Pack, you know that Sarah Lovecraft and I love pointing this guy out because it really does have everything that we need. There are 3 or 4 different sizes of jump rings. It's always good to have lots of different sizes and different finishes, really, of jump rings on stock, on hand, whenever you are making earrings. I'm finding I'm always needing to attach something to something else, and the jump ring is how you do that. So I have my Findings Variety Pack, and if you don't need all of the different findings, just some jump rings, they happen to come in here really, really well. Another thing that is indispensable when you are making earrings are head pins. Now, a head pin, and again, for those of you who are expert jewelry makers by now, I apologize if some of the information is a little bit rudimentary, but there are a lot of people who have never done this before, right? So we want to make sure that we get them indoctrinated in our jewelry making cult as efficiently and as kindly as possible, right? So this is a head pin. It's just a piece of wire, usually like a 21, 22 gauge wire with a little stoppage on the end. These happen to be ball head pins. You can get them flat. You can get an eye pin, which is a head pin that has a loop on the end of it, right? This loop is already here, so you don't have to do to make your own, but of course you can. And then I also have in my pile a decorative head pin. This guy jumped in here. There are all different kinds of head pins. You can go from super basic to super fancy. So head pins are where we're going to start with our journey. Also on my mat, just in the beginning, I like to go over all of the materials that we're going to be working with today. I have some pinch pails. So these are great for top drilled beads, for irregularly shaped tops of pendants. Great thing. We're going to talk about how to open these and how to close them. Super, super easy finding to use. Also a great idea to have on hand when you're making jewelry is some 22 gauge or 24 gauge or 20 gauge artistic wire, German style wire, some sort of wire. This is what we're going to be using to make some wrapped loops, some attaches to attaches. Okay. Let's see, what else do I want to mention real quick? I don't think I talked about my chain yet. Where's my little piece of chain? I love making earrings with scraps of chain. So when you buy a roll of chain or a portion of chain, oftentimes there are little scraps left over. This scrap happens to be about 6 3/4 of an inch. So that actually makes for some pretty dangly earrings if I put that in half. I know as beaders, we like to not waste and not throw away material. So this is a really good way of using little pieces of scrap chain. I have some beads there. We'll talk about that later. Let's talk about tools real quick, because again, when you first start out and you walk into that beading aisle, there are so many tools and so many different so it's a little overwhelming. What do all these different tools do? Do I really need 3 different kinds of chain nose pliers? I mean, if you're me, yes, but when you're just starting out, probably not. But some really helpful tools to have on hand when you are making earrings. Let's go from most to nice to have. All right, I'm gonna pull them out one by one because they don't want to move. Okay, so chain nose pliers, okay? You know the chain nose because they're flat on the inside and they come to a nice point here. Chain nose pliers, indispensable. And quite frankly, you're gonna need 2 of these because when you open and close jump rings or you open and close loops, it's always a good idea to do it with 2 jump rings, or I'm sorry, 2 chain nose pliers. I think I spoke erroneously, really not for loops, for jump rings, okay? So if you wanna get those 2 flat nose pliers, those 2 chain nose pliers, a flat nose plier is a good second one to get. So it serves a very similar purpose to the chain nose pliers. It just has a flat nose, okay? Third important tool is the round nose pliers. This is what we do when we make anything round. So wrapped loops, simple loops, anything round that we need to make, this is your friend for that. And then the last must have is a really good cutter. This is the Beadalon blue handle. These are our Italian cutters. We refer to them in a couple of different ways. These are my favorite cutters for all things jewelry making. They're a little spendy, but worth the investment, which is a very good point to emphasize. The better your quality tools, the better your quality jewelry. There's one place that you should not skimp with when you're making jewelry, any jewelry, earrings, necklaces, what have you. Do not skimp on your tools. Always get the best tools that you can afford. It will make your life so much happier. Okay, so those are the must-haves. The nice-to-haves are the nylon jaw pliers. These are great for straightening wire. So here, this head pin, it came out of the package, it was bent. Well, that's a bummer. Well, it's not an unsolvable problem because all you need to do is hold it here with your chain nose pliers and give a little straighten here, and being a little more gentle than I usually am. But look, I just straightened that right out, okay? So by using these nylon jaw pliers, you can take a head pin that might have come out of the package bent and unusable, or so you thought, but now I have a perfectly good head pin. We're going to use that guy. And then another nice to have plier is a bail making plier. This makes a whole bunch of different sizes of loops. And I see a lot of comments about other tools coming in. And yes, all other tools, in my opinion, are necessary for all jewelry making, but I have like 50 different tools over here that I'm looking at to my right. You don't need that. These are really where you want to start. But if you're doing, just to mention really quickly, these cutters are for soft wire. They're for copper wire, they're for jewelry wire. You would never want to cut memory wire with these. For memory wire, you always want to cut with a special pliers called a memory wire shears. And this is what those look like. But that is a different class for a different day. And in fact, we have done several classes that you can go back after this class, of course, and watch on the Michael's YouTube channel. Yeah, the Michael's YouTube channel. Okay, so I have left over from another project, just a couple of different beads. And to make earrings, I generally recommend making each step of your earrings at the same time. Do you have to do that? Not necessarily, but it helps with symmetry. It helps with making sure that you don't forget a specific order of your beads. It's just a good habit to get into, especially when you're making everything from scratch. It's a little tip or trick there. So I'm using 2 head pins, one of which I straightened and one of which came out of the package nice and straight. And I'm going to just move my camera down just a skosh. See if we can't get a little bit closer. And what you will also see when you go into the beading aisle at Michael's is several different kinds of the same tool. So I have small hands, so I find a smaller tool very comfortable. Wyatt tends to like the ergo handles a little bit better because he has larger hands. It might not have to do with hand size. It might just be comfort. So one set of pliers, if it's not quite working for you, maybe try a different set. It might not be you. It might just be that the tools are a little uncomfortable for your particular level of comfort. Now, a couple of things here. So here on the end, I have these balls. So my beads aren't going anywhere. But what I've often noticed is that my beads from Michael's, and you've heard me talk about this before, have slightly larger holes than some other beads might have. So sometimes when I string a bead on, it might just pass right through. There might be the hole might be too big, that head pin. That happens sometimes. A good tip for that is find a smaller bead. I just happen to have a little catch-all over here that I have some smaller beads in. So if that was the case, I could just put on a littler bead with a little hole just to get that, just to solve that problem. But I'm not really sure that I like how that looks. So I'm going to take that one off and start right here. Oh, and just as a quick little aside, I happen to right here have a nice lever back earring wire and another style. See, it really is a catch-all. I have a lot of catch-alls. And a really good comment just came through from Karen. She says she uses a 3mm daisy spacer or a head pin. Yes, great tip, because that daisy spacer is going to be nice and flat. And unfortunately, in my arm's reach, I don't have any of those right now, but maybe I will see one out of the corner of my eye. And seed bead is also a great way of doing it. You can open your seed bead container. These are, of course, a little bit of a stash of seed beads from my friends at Dawn Bead. You can try that as well here on the bottom, just as a way of stopping that. And I actually kind of like how that one looks, so I'm going to leave that on. Another way, just to fancy up the top of your bead a little bit, is to use a bead cap. I love using bead caps in earrings. It just adds just a little bit more something, right? Just a fun thing. Oh, did Brenda just mention bead cap? And she must have read my mind, or perhaps I read hers. A bead cap on the bottom is also a really good idea. I kind of like putting them on the top as a hat, but the bottom will work as well. Let's just try that for fun. For fun over here. Bead cap is going to look really cute on the bottom. And again, just kind of play around with what works, what likes, what is good to your eye, what is pleasing to your eye. But the finishing off is going to be the same no matter what. So let me move a little bit of the supplies out of the way, because we are going to focus on the two ways of finishing off our tops. First, we're going to do a wrapped. First we're going to do a simple loop. Then we are going to do a wrapped loop. We're going to talk about the differences and why it matters. So I showed this this tip on Facebook Live in another group, and some of the friends are here, so you guys will recognize this. This is how I like to make a simple loop. And it's up for debate, which is easier and which is harder. I don't know. Sometimes simple loops are easier for me. Sometimes wrapped loops are easier for me. It really is all a matter of preference and what you're comfortable with. But the first step in a simple loop. And caveat, disclaimer, different instructors will teach this in different ways. So this is how I like to do a simple loop, but if you take a class with a different instructor, they might have a different way of doing this. So if you don't like my way, then maybe another instructor has a better way of doing it. Or if you love my way, then thank you, I appreciate that. So I'm grabbing this in my flat nose pliers and I'm leaving about a 1/16 of an inch or so, just a hair right above where my bead cap is. And I'm going to bend down at a right angle. It's always a little challenging to show making simple unwrapped loops because you can see how I'm holding my hands here right now. It's a little awkward, but down at a 90-degree angle. Okay. I just need to reset real quick. And one of the challenges to a simple loop is making sure that you cut your waist wire or not your waist wire, your length of wire, the correct size to be able to get consistently sized loops each time. And that is why I use a flat nose plier to do it, because I can come in here and using my finger here to make sure that that end doesn't go flying at the dog, the cat, the kid, the husband, the friend, wherever. You want to get in good habit of holding the ends of your wire as you snip them. But I snip that right on the end so that my end here, this little piece of wire that I'm going to be turning into a loop, will end up being consistently sized each time. Okay. So now I'm going to come here, and this is where you got to play the guessing game. Unfortunately, I have done this a lot. So I can kind of eyeball on my pliers, but each pliers are differently sized at the tips, and each way, or each, what is the word I'm looking for? Each flat nose plier will have a different end here too. So you kind of have to play around with your tools to get it quite right. But all we're going to do now is we're going to hold it, and I'm not holding it up here, so I have wire sticking out. I'm holding it right here on the end, and I'm going to rotate my wrist counterclockwise very gently. So we're going to watch it first, and I'm going to do it another time. So I'm going to rotate, 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 rotate. And I'm doing very small incremental movements. I'm going to pull my pliers and reposition them. I'm not getting a great shot here. We're going to do this again so that I close that loop up. Okay. Let's try that again. I'm going to do it without the bead cap on the top because I think that was a little bit getting in the way of a good demonstration. So let's go ahead and bend this down again and snip it off so we can really see what's going on here. Okay, and I'm going to come back in with my pliers at the end, and I'm going to rotate, 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 rotate. And that should give me a good loop. Not great on my first try. Sometimes when I'm trying to show it in the camera and also show it to you, it doesn't work out the first time. So it's okay. I just need to bend it back and bend it back over again. And I should be able to get a good loop. Mostly I'm just proving the point of the beady friends in the chat. We're saying that it's not so simple to make a simple loop, right? It is a misnomer. But with a little bit of practice, and by a little bit of practice, I mean kind of a lot of practice, you can get a nice simple loop. So to open and close this guy, what you're going to do is you're going to hold on to that end with your pliers and pull it toward you. Then you're going to grab your ear wire, hook it into your ear wire, and then very gently close that ear wire up. And I need to bump my camera up just a little bit because I keep hitting it, and I do apologize. It's always a challenge for whether or not you can see, I can see, or I bump the camera. So let me just scooch this up just a scotch. I think it will be a little bit easier. Are you holding the end of the wire while you rotate? It looks as the tool is moving inward as you rotate. It should be on the same place on the wire, or sorry, on the plier as I'm doing. So let me just show that one more time. We have got plenty of time. So again, my head pin has come out a little bit wonky, right? I don't want a wonky head pin. So I'm going to use my nylon jaw pliers, and I'm going to pull that nice and straight. And that's very satisfying. Let's try a different set of beads this time, just for funsies. So I'm going to take, and again, these are just all leftover beads from other projects. You might recognize them from different classes that I've done over the years. So let's just try 2 beads here. Super simple, right? We found some beads that we like, and we're just getting started. We're going to thread them up, no big thing. And we're going to do that same simple loop on the top. And I think it's actually going to be a little bit better with my camera down a little bit. So I'm going to snip off the end here. And what I'm doing, I don't want to take my pliers and rotate my wrist all the way around like that. All it's going to do is be uncomfortable for my shoulder, right? I want to grab the end and just make small, gentle rotations until my loop is closed. Okay, and if I've over rotated, I can just come back and fix it. A lot of people get a little bent out of shape about their loop not being perfect on that first rotation. Just fix it. It's just wire. It'll eventually go where you want it to. And if not, you can start over again. There are tools out there for making consistent loops, but it's always a good idea to learn how to do it by hand the right way first. Okay, so that's a simple loop. And again, practice makes perfect, or practice makes progress, I should say, on simple loops. It's not something you're going to get the first time you try it. Or if you do it, you're not going to consistently make loops. I still mess up loops. It's not the easiest thing in the world, right? As we just witnessed with me trying to demonstrate it. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a wrapped loop. And some people think that this is easier. Some people prefer doing this. And it really just depends. There are a lot of things that it depends on. I can't give any hard and fast rules why you would use a simple loop over a wrapped loop, except for one. There's one rule, and I will mention that as we go along. So in order to do the wrapped loop, what we're going to do is we're going to hold the plier, the round nose plier. Sorry, getting a little distracted. There's a weed whacker going on outside my window. I hope you guys can't hear that. I've got it. I mean, I'm holding it right at the top of my beads, and I'm going to do I do it with my finger or my thumb? I think either one will work, but I use my thumb. You want to put a bend in that about 45 degrees. Okay, so not 90 degrees, about 45 degrees. And then you want to reposition your tool. You're holding your tool there to get that nice bend. My tool is now horizontal. I'm going to turn it so it's vertical. Okay, so let me show that again. I'm holding it in between horizontally, and I'm going to move my tool so I'm holding it vertically. Okay. Now I'm going to take my pointer and I'm going to bend that wire over the top jaw. okay? But now what I want to do, I have that wire bent over the top jaw, down at about whatever this 45 degree is. So if that's 90 and that's 90, that's cutting it in half. I want to now put it on the bottom jaw. And again, different people do this different ways. This is the easiest way that I have found to do this. And now I'm holding this in my right hand, but I'm going to move it to my left hand. It is easier for me to do this part with my left hand than it is, I'm sorry, holding it in my left hand than it is in my right. Again, other people do it different ways. I'm now going to hold the end with my pliers and pull it around toward me. This is the most important step right there, is getting a nice, clean, that's a good shot right there, clean 90-degree bend here with your round nose pliers. Okay, around your round nose pliers is a better way of saying that. And then I like to use the push and pull technique here. I don't tend to wrap around like this. What I do is I push and then I pull and then I push and then I pull and then I push. And it should get about 2 to 2.5 times around. I had a little bit of extra space in there. I wasn't looking quite as well as I should have. And then I want to come in here and cut that as close as I can with my cutters. Again, I'm holding this with my other hand so that it doesn't go flying. And if there's, it's tough to see, but if there's ever just that little bit of edge sticking off, that's where I like to come in and just tuck it down. It's one of my pet peeves, is little ends there that stick out. So you just want to take your pliers and just ever so gently tuck it down. All right, so we have a little wrap here on the top. I did a much better job on my first try there than I did on that simple loop. And again, same thing. Okay, so here's an interesting challenge that we have now, especially for us newbies, right? We have a wrap loop here and we have a closed loop here. So how do we get this to attach to each other? 2 ways, okay? The first way doesn't require any other anything. We're going to come in here with our round nose pliers, and this ear wire right here, this loop actually opens up. And when you open it up, you want to open it up toward you. You see how I just put a little bit of an opening, a little bit of a bend in there to open it toward me. And then I can slip this on and then push it back into position. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth until it's right back into position. You don't want to come in here, and I'm going to do it and we can all cringe together. You don't want to open this out like that, because now my loop is distorted. It will never really go back to a nice round shape again. You really want to be attentive to opening it up this way and then pushing it back into place. Okay, another way to do this, to add a little bit of extra something, a little extra dangle, a little extra pizzazz, is to use a jump ring. So depending on kind of the scale of your design also, this might make more sense. So here I have a jump ring, and all a jump ring is a little ring that has a split in it. And the same way that I showed opening that loop, you want to open that jump ring. So I'm grabbing one side with one plier, the other side with the other plier, and twisting that toward me. Okay, so you can see now I have a big space there, probably bigger than I need, to loop my ear wire on, to loop my earring on, and I like to just give a little wiggle back and forth, and you'll kind of hear and feel a little click when that jump ring is nice and closed. And so now that jump ring being there adds just a little extra razzmatazz, a little razzle dazzle, a little extra dangling for your earring. This also becomes really important when you are dealing with beads that have specific sides to them. So we're going to show how to use a Briolette, which is a bead that has a hole here drilled up at the top. And so it's going to matter if you want your earring to hang like this, or if you want your earring to hang like this. That's where jump rings become your best friend, is because they can very quickly and very easily turn something from one side to another side. Okay, so that is number one, and number two is doing a, I'm sorry, that was earring number one, simple head pin earring. Now we're going to talk about pinch bails, okay? And pinch bails are a great way of adding components, beads, pendants, crystals, anything that is drilled on the top is what these guys are really, really good for. And they come in, they look just like this. And the way that you open these guys up, again, with that very first tool that we talked about, the chain nose pliers, you just gently, with your jaws closed, place it in here and open the jaws. See how those two pins are coming apart? So if you open the jaws, now you have the ability to sneak something in there. And what we're going to sneak in there is one of these really fun, let's see, we have pink glass AB heart beads. And where's my part number? Just in case anybody wants to look them up. There's the part number right there. And these actually come on a little bit of a chain. So why not use this chain as something to dangle your earrings off of, right? And it comes with a nice big jump ring here. And you could use that nice big jump ring to attach it to an earring, but we are nothing in fancy pantses here in our beading journey. And so using a pinch bail makes for just a little bit of a fancier, finish, something that's going to look just a little bit of a step ahead, right? So first thing you need to do is make sure that you opened it up big enough to be able to get that hole in. And I did not open mine long enough or big enough. Better to open too little in the beginning than too much in the beginning. Just file that away. And believe me, believe me when I say. So I'm just going to open it just a little bit more, because this is actually a nice thick piece of metal. But when you are working in metals, be them base metal like this metal is here, or sterling silver, or even gold filled, metal has a lot of peculiarities, a lot of character traits that you need to be aware of. And one of them is it can tend to become brittle if it gets worked too much. So opening and closing these pinch bails will eventually weaken this joint here. And you don't want to do that, because it will end up breaking. So the less strain, the less movement you have on this metal, the better off your jewelry will be. So all I did is I just kind of used small incremental movements to move that up. And I'm going to slide that bead in. Really easy. Just slide it in right there and just right on the top. And then I can oftentimes just use my fingers, my best tools, right, to squeeze that pinch bail onto the top of that bead. I don't even need to come in here with any extra pliers, anything additional, anything. So really easy way of making something just kind of a little next level. And you can get bails with all kinds of pretty extra decorations. But you know what I would do with this one? I'd get a little flat back crystal and a little GS Hypo Cement and glue a little flat back crystal right there, just for a little extra blingy bling. I can't help myself. And again, all we would do here is, and this is always where I have to take a moment to line this up, and I can see, oh, okay, great. I don't need an extra jump ring, because the loops of the top of my bail and of my my earring are aligned correctly. So I'm just going to come in here again and scoop that out and in here and shut that down. And now I have a really cute earring. And I'm fully aware that I said in the beginning that you should do your 2 earrings at the same time, and I'm only doing one of each. That is something that I know that I'm doing. But good practice is when you are making earrings, not for demonstration in class, go ahead and make one and then do each step each time. It just makes for, you have better chances of symmetry at the end. Okay, so great pinch bails and lots of different pinch bail options to try from. But if you don't want to do our next step, which is creating a briolette wrap at the top of a top drilled bead, this is a really good shorter way of doing that. But I told you we were starting simple and we were finishing strong. So I'm going to be using a briolette. This is a top drilled briolette and it's drilled this way. This bead, these beads are drilled front to back. This one is drilled side to side. Always something to be aware of when you are considering your design is how your bead is drilled. Just something that you kind of becomes second nature the more jewelry making that you do. But in the beginning, it's something that is a good idea to be aware that you should be paying attention to. So I'm taking some 22 gauge artistic wire. This is dead soft artistic wire. You could use German style wire for this as well. If these words mean nothing to you, I encourage you to go back and watch some of the past Michael's classes that I have done on wire work and that Sarah Lovecraft has done on wire work as well, where we talk all about half heart and gauges and types and wire work and what all those different terms mean. But what I did is I cut a piece about 5 inches, a little longer than I need, but I always like to cut a little bit more wire because it's always easier to snip off the ends without, it's always easier to snip off the ends than it is to add more wire. Just reading a couple of the comments here right now. Okay, so briolette wrap. Okay, and I'm going to go a little bit faster this time. But what you want to do, and this is a finger heavy kind of a thing, thumbs, we're going to bend this up and over. So we're going 45 degrees this way, and then up and over 45 degrees this way. And if you want these bends to be a little sharper, you can certainly come in here with the flat nose pliers and really get a nice sharp bend. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. But also in the learning process, sometimes it's easier just to do that part with your fingers. So now I have a cute little, I don't know, little alien, little bug kind of with antenna going on here. Lots of different wire working fun things that you could do, but we're talking briolette wraps right now. So what I need to do is I need one of these wires, and I generally have the shorter of the wires that I bend down. So that's at a 90-degree angle here, and bend this one up. So now I have this nice, clean 90-degree angle. And it's actually facing the wrong way for how I want to show, I think. But the important part is a 90-degree angle. If your 90-degree angle is going this way, that's okay too. But now what we need to do is wrap this wire here, the one that's going this way at a 90-degree angle, around this wire here. A good way of doing that is hold it right at the top with either your chain nose pliers, your bent chain nose pliers. I tend to try not to hold it with my round nose pliers if I can avoid that, because sometimes the round nose pliers can put a little compression, a little mark in my wire. And I do, again, hold this in my left hand or my non-dominant hand, and I use that same push-pull method to make this wrap. So I'm going to take the end here and I'm going to pull it around to myself. Then I'm going to push it back. I'm going to pull it around to myself, and I'm going to push it back. And I generally do 2 here on the bottom. Again, lots of different very creative and artistic ways of doing this part of our of the Briolette wrap, simplest one right here. So again, I mentioned that I made this a little bit longer than necessary, but it's always better to have more than less. I'm going to snip this off. And again, good habits to start early is coming in here and tucking your end in. Even with this guy, you're always going to want to tuck your end in. And then for funsies, you could come in here and actually add another bead. It's always a nice way to make an earring, a nice way to finish off a Briolette. And then all we're going to do is that same wrapped loop that we did before. Take a moment though and think, do you want your wrap loop to be parallel or on the same plane as your Briolette? Or do you want it front to back? Do you want it kind of in an intersection of that Briolette? That's going to be determined by how your ear wire hoop is hanging. And some ear wire hoops go front to back and some go side to side. So just something to be aware of. It's one of those kind of things in the very beginning that you don't necessarily think about, but always a good thing to keep in the back of your mind. And sometimes when you're me, you just do it however you feel like doing it and hope for the best and use a jump ring if it doesn't work. So I'm going to bend that back, right? That 45-degree angle again. I'm going to reposition my pliers with my pointer finger. I'm going to pull this around and down, and I'm giving it a nice tug because I am using 22 gauge wire to get it nice and tight around that top jaw of the pliers. Then I'm going to reposition. So instead of it being around the top jaw of the pliers, it's now around the bottom jaw of the pliers. I'm going to switch hands. And again, using that push and pull, first step, I'm going to pull it around toward me. And you can see I over rotated that a little bit just to get a nice sharp bend. And you'll kind of feel out what is the best, what kind of feels right for you when you're doing this. But again, pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling. And sometimes I do a little bit of wrapping a little bit faster. Again, it's kind of whatever feels right to be able to get that nice tight bend or that nice tight wrap. And I snip that off again. And once again, I'm going to come in here and just tuck my tail in. Okay. If you're using really good pliers, you should be able to get a really tight snip, really tight cut, but it's always a good idea to just go in and give just that littlest of squeezes to get it down really nicely. Okay, so the last thing that I was going to show, and of course I always seem to run out of time when I'm teaching classes. Is that just me? That I'm always running out of time. I just want to kind of take some of these dangle-doos and attach them to a chain to show how to do this kind of cha-cha style dangly-do earring. And then for those of you who are willing to stay an extra couple minutes, I will show how to make your own ear wire in case that's something that you do not know how to do yet. We're gonna race through that one at the end. Even Finn is like, all right, Mom, it's time to start wrapping up. Okay, so I have a little piece of chain here, and I tend to start with 2 inches. I don't know why. It's just kind of a habit that I've gotten into. 2 inches. And chain you can generally cut with your regular pliers without too much of a problem. And one of the things that I really like to do, another habit that I got into, is to attach my chain to my ear wire at the get-go. It just gives me a little bit more to hold on to as I'm making my earring. So opening up that loop again, threading that chain on, closing that loop. So now instead of just this little piece of chain, I actually have something more to hold on to. And if I want to go an extra step, I can actually use an earring stand, or sometimes I just loop them over like a jar or a cup, a mug, but it just makes it a little bit easier and a little bit less fiddly to work with if you use, if you have it anchored to something. Just a little extra tip, but it makes it very difficult for me to demonstrate. So we're going to just do it the old fashioned way. So this is where our jump rings can come in very, very handy. So I'm going to just kind of take some of the dangle doos and add them up the sides of my chain here. And I'm laughing because if you are watching live and you can see me in the little small part on the top, if you're watching on your computer, I'm just seeing myself searching for my tools all through class today, / every class, every day. As soon as I put a tool down, it has disappeared. Okay, so I just made that dangle do, and I'm adding it with a jump ring to the last link of my chain. I like to work from the bottom up. Do you have to? I don't think so. But that's just kind of how I like to do it. And this is where that doing one earring at a time, or I'm sorry, doing one step on each earring comes into place really well, or really makes life easier, because you're going to start counting links up, and then you won't have to worry about remembering where your links are to be able to get symmetrical earrings. Now, I love this just as a design with a nice piece of chain, a piece of nice dainty chain that was left over from another project, little scrap of wire, a couple of extra beads. Here in not very long at all, we have a beautiful earring that would be perfect for a gift, for a bride, for a Mother's Day present, for anybody. In fact, I might make another one and wear them tonight. Just a really, really simple and elegant design. It's one of my favorite go-tos for earrings. But depending on how many dangle doos you have, on how clustered you want your earring to be, you can just start adding your dangles. So I like to skip a link. Sometimes I don't skip a link. Sometimes I use every link. Sometimes I put more than one thing in a link. That is really a design and a style, choice. But all you need to do to add something is take that jump ring and open it up like we did before, thread our dangle through, and then we count up however many beads we want it to count up. And sometimes I eyeball it. Sometimes I'm like, do I want to do it down here? Do I want to do it up here? You kind of figure out in terms of scale where it's going to look best. Maybe I think that where it's going to look best is not skipping anything. And sometimes you're going to need to go through and change things. There's no kind of hard and fast rule to where you want to put things on your chain as you're doing dangles. You just want to make sure that when you open and close your jump rings, you wiggle them back and forth so that they stay in shape, and you wiggle them nice and together so that they don't open up and you don't lose the dangles off of your design. So all you would do is continue adding dangles up for the rest of your for your necklace. And then at the end, you have it as dangly or as non-dangly as you want. So one last thing I did promise that I was going to show how to make an ear wire. And that is where the bail making pliers come in really handy. You can also do this with like a Sharpie or a marker, a pencil, a crochet hook, a knitting needle, anything round. But we're jewelry makers. We should use the right tools for the job, right? So I'm actually using a head pin, right? These are 2-inch head pins. Yeah, 2-inch head pins. with a little ball here on the end, it makes for a really nice ear wire. The other reason why using head pins is a really good idea is because they're already all pretty finished here on the end. If you make them out of beading wire, or I'm sorry, I should say artistic wire or German style wire, this stuff, the end is going to be a little sharp, right? And in that case, you will need to come in with a file. Where's my file? Is it the file? No. Where's my file? You're going to need to come in with a jewelry file and file off that end. There are a bunch of different tools, including a cut burr. But again, that's a class for a different die. But all you need to do here, and you can see there are all these different sizes of stepped jaws or stepped rings or stepped loops. Here, I'm going to use the smallest one. And I'm going to start at the side that has the ball. And I'm going to hold the ball in between those two smallest parts and with no room here. So the ball is right up at the top. Let me get it better. There we go. Okay, right up at the top. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this around. And again, I'm using small motions with my wrist, and I'm using my thumb to kind of hold it against. And now I have a little loop here, right? That little loop looks very similar. Where did my little thingy go? To this loop right here. This is a pre-made ear wire. This is the one that I'm making right now. So now what I want to do is I usually don't go to the biggest barrel. I go to the second biggest barrel. It's just force of habit. I don't know. It's just what I do. But of course, I'm putting it in between those two biggest barrels. But the side that has the ball on it, that is facing the largest barrel, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to now bend the wire around that smallest barrel. And I'm just using my fingers for this. I'm kind of doing a combination of using my fingers and turning the tool. And you can see that now I have a more ear wire shape, but this part is still coming straight down like that. So now what I want to do is find again those flat nose pliers. And I'm going to hold that right at the very end. See, I'm not doing any cutting. I'm not doing any trimming, any worrying about any finishing that I will need to do to this end here. Because all I'm going to do is I'm going to bend that up ever so slightly. So I don't know, it's not quite 45 degrees, maybe like a 20, 30 degree angle right there. Because now my head pin looks very similar to, let's do this in a way that makes a little bit more sense. My ear wire, I actually think looks better than the store-bought ear wire that was also probably made out of a head pin, but just not by my hand. So if you like the look of this head pin, if you need a lot of head pin, or I'm sorry, if you like the look of this ear wire, if you run out of ear wires and have a lot of head pins, all you need to do is just get a little head pin, and you can use a head pin. Heck, you could start with an eye pin, right? And just make that bend here and not even worry about putting that extra bend in. I just really like the way that that ball looks on the very, very tip. Just again, a little bit of an extra something, an extra decorative part. This is the stepped bail making pliers, both available in Michael's stores and online. The Beadalon is available. The Beadalon branded one is available online. It's the stepped bail making pliers. It's one of those tools that you never thought you couldn't live without, but all of a sudden when you have it, you're like, wow, I could never live without that tool. All right, friends. So I only went 1 minute over our class today. I'm pretty impressed with myself on that front. We made a great big beading mess here on the beading mat, and I think that we are more than ready to go ahead and take that overhead camera. I'm not sure. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you so much, Felicia. So beauty friends, if and when you make anything, any pairs of earrings that you learned some techniques and maybe a new tip or trick that you did not know before, go ahead and post that on your socials. Make sure that you use the tags, Make It with Michael's Classroom, Beadalon, and then also please tag me. I'm at Meredith Joy Designs on Instagram. After class, whenever I get a couple new followers that I know are my students, it makes my heart smile. So I appreciate that so very much. We've got a couple of great classes coming up for both myself and Sarah Lovecraft, who teaches for Beadalon or for the Michael's Community Classroom on behalf of Beadalon. And you can find our classes. I teach often on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and Sarah's classes actually have now moved to 1 p.m. Eastern time. So just be aware of that. She had been teaching a couple at 2 p.m. Eastern time. All of Sarah's classes are now at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So I cannot thank everybody enough for hanging out with me, whether you are live or on the replay. You can always find me through Beadalon or through Instagram if you have any follow-up questions. And I will again see you next time. And until then, happy beading.